The mistletoe hanging above Marcus Hartford's head felt like a bad joke. He stood frozen beneath it at the Apex Media holiday party watching Victoria Blackwell cut through the crowd like a knife through butter. Her emerald dress caught every light in the ballroom, and clutched in her right hand was a red folder he recognized immediately. His proposal, the one someone had flagged as stolen work. His chest tightened as she got closer. This was it, the moment his second chance career died on Christmas Eve. 8 months at Apex Media. 8 months of proving himself, of staying late when everyone else went home, of pouring everything into projects nobody else wanted to touch. The creative development department was supposed to be his fresh start after losing Sarah, after rebuilding from nothing, after finally getting Declan stable and off to MIT. A chance to do something that mattered again. But now, standing here in his best suit with cheap wine warming in his hand, Marcus realized how fast everything could fall apart. Again. Victoria Blackwell wasn't just any boss. She was the CEO, the youngest person to ever run Apex Media. 43 and already a legend. Everyone knew her story. Climbed from the foster care system, gave up any semblance of personal life, probably sacrificed her soul along the way. People whispered about her in the break room, called her ruthless, cold, brilliant. He'd seen a different side during their project meetings over the past 3 months. The way she leaned forward when an idea excited her, eyes lighting up like a kid seeing snow for the first time. How she'd stay after everyone left, asking questions nobody else thought to ask, pushing him to make the work better, deeper, more meaningful. There was something underneath that hard shell, something warm and real that she worked overtime to hide. But none of that would matter if she believed he was a thief. The proposal in her hand was for a graphic novel series called Shattered City. Something he'd created 6 years ago when his life was completely different. Back when he was broke and desperate and pouring his heart onto pages at 3 in the morning because sleep wouldn't come. Back when Sarah's funeral bills were drowning him and 13-year-old Declan was watching his father fall apart. A small independent publisher called Crescent Moon Comics had bought the rights, printed 3,000 copies, then went bankrupt 18 months later. The comics disappeared into obscurity. Marcus thought they were gone forever, buried with that chapter of his life. Then 3 months ago, he'd been cleaning out storage at his brother Brennan's place and found them again. The drawings, the stories. Everything he'd been too afraid to share with the world back then because they were too raw, too honest, too much of his broken soul on display. But looking at them with fresh eyes, 6 years of healing behind him, Marcus saw their value. They deserved better than a handful of remaindered copies gathering dust in bargain bins. So he'd updated them, polished the rough edges, and submitted them to Victoria as a new project for Apex, under his real name this time. Marcus Hartford, not the pen name Reed Shadows he'd hidden behind when grief was still bleeding through every panel. He never mentioned they had existed before. Never thought anyone would remember an obscure indie comic from a bankrupt publisher. Stupid. So incredibly stupid. Because someone on Victoria's team must have recognized the art style or found an old copy online. Someone had done their homework, and now she thought he was a fraud trying to steal his own work. His phone buzzed against his thigh. Text from Declan, his 19-year-old son up at MIT. Storm's getting bad up here. Roads might close tonight. Uncle Brennan says don't try to drive. Perfect. Just perfect. The only proof Marcus had of his ownership sat in storage containers at Brennan's house 3 hours north in upstate New York, and a blizzard was about to make them unreachable. Victoria was 10 feet away now. 9. 8. He could see her jaw set tight, that look she got when she was about to deliver bad news in board meetings. The way her green eyes had gone flat and cold, nothing like the warmth he'd glimpsed when she first read his proposal 3 months back. His hands felt numb despite the overheated ballroom. Should he speak? First, apologize, explain. His mind raced through a dozen opening lines, each one worse than the last. Then he noticed something that made his stomach drop even further. Through the crowd near the entrance, he spotted 3 people in expensive overcoats just arriving. The Sterling Partners executives. Robert Sterling himself, silver-haired and distinguished, the man who could make or break Apex's future with a single phone call. They'd arrived early, way too early for their scheduled appearance. Sterling Partners represented the biggest deal Apex had going, a $200 million investment partnership that could transform the company from a mid-tier content producer into a major player. But Sterling was old school, traditional, the kind of man who still believed in handshake deals and looking a person in the eye. His investment criteria literally included phrases like moral integrity and family values and wholesome American content. If Robert Sterling got even a hint of scandal, a plagiarism accusation against one of Apex's creative leads, he'd walk away without looking back. The entire deal would collapse. Victoria's company would suffer. People would lose their jobs. All because Marcus had been too proud to admit his new proposal was actually 6 years old. Victoria's eyes met his across the final few feet of polished marble floor. Those eyes that usually sparkled during their late-night brainstorming sessions now looked hard as glass. Her voice came low enough that only he could hear over the Christmas music and cocktail chatter. "We need to talk. My office. Now." Marcus swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry, despite the wine. "I know what you're thinking, but I can't explain. Can you. She shifted the red folder and he caught a glimpse of printouts inside. Screenshots, evidence, because right now it looks like you submitted stolen work under your own name. Do you have any idea what that could do to this company? To my reputation? It's not stolen." The words came out harder than he intended, but he was tired of being accused, tired of having his integrity questioned. 6 years of rebuilding himself from rock bottom, and here he was again defending his character. "Those stories are mine. I created every single panel 6 years ago, every word, every image. Mine." "Then why does the internet say otherwise?" Victoria pulled out her phone with her freehand screen, already showing search results he'd never seen before. "Someone posted scans of the original comics online. Posted them with the pen name you used back then, a name nobody at Apex knows about. Reed Shadows. Care to explain why your proposal matches these word for word?" His heart hammered against his ribs. Someone hadn't just found the old comics. They digitized them, posted them publicly, and made it look like he was the plagiarist instead of the original creator. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate, calculated. This was sabotage. "Because I wrote those." Marcus forced himself to meet her gaze, to let her see the truth in his eyes. "Reed Shadows was me. That pen name was mine. I can prove it. All the original files are at my brother Brennan's house upstate. The contracts with Crescent Moon Comics, the artwork files with creation dates, the copyright registration, everything. I can show you the paper trail." Victoria's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind those green eyes. Doubt, maybe, or hope. "Convenient that the proof is somewhere I can't verify right now. I'll drive there tonight." Desperation crept into his voice, and he didn't care anymore. Pride had no place when your career was burning down around you. "Right now, I'll get everything and bring it back before morning. It's about 3 hours north near Grafton. Please, Victoria, just give me until tomorrow morning. Let me prove this to you." "There's a storm coming." She glanced at her phone again, and he saw the weather alert notification. National Weather Service is calling it the worst Christmas Eve blizzard in a decade. "You won't make it there and back safely." "I don't care." The truth of it settled in his chest. "I need to clear my name. For my career, yes. For my integrity, absolutely." But mostly because he stopped himself before finishing that thought, before admitting that he needed her to believe him, that somehow over the past 3 months of working together, she'd become more than just his boss, that the way she challenged his ideas and pushed him to be better had woken something in him he thought died with Sarah. That the idea of Victoria thinking he was a liar cut deeper than losing his job ever could. Her eyes searched his face, looking for something. Truth, maybe, or deception. He didn't know what she saw, but her shoulders dropped slightly, the rigid line of them softening just a fraction. Then she glanced past him, and her entire body went rigid again. Marcus turned to follow her gaze. Robert Sterling was looking directly at them. The investor's weathered face carried that expression of casual interest that meant he was paying very close attention while pretending not to. Sterling's eyes moved from Victoria to Marcus, to the mistletoe hanging directly above them, and something shifted in the older man's demeanor. He was reading the situation, drawing conclusions, and in about 30 seconds, he was going to walk over here and ask what was wrong. Ask why the CEO and a creative director were having an intense conversation at a Christmas party. Ask questions that would lead to answers about plagiarism allegations and investigations in scandal. Questions that would kill the Sterling deal before midnight struck. Marcus's military training kicked in the part of his brain that had kept him alive through 2 deployments in the Middle East. Assess the threat, identify options, execute the best tactical move available, even if it wasn't a good move, just the least bad one. Sterling wanted wholesome, traditional, family values. He wanted to see a company where people were happy, where relationships were real, where the American dream still existed in some pure form. A CEO confronting an employee about fraud, that was a nightmare. But a CEO and an employee caught in a spontaneous holiday moment under the mistletoe, that was the kind of heartwarming story Sterling would eat up. The idea hit Marcus like a physical blow, completely insane and potentially career-ending, but it was the only play he had left. He leaned closer to Victoria, close enough that his words were just for her. The Sterling executives just saw us. Robert Sterling is watching right now. If we stand here looking like we're fighting, he'll ask questions. Questions you can't answer without mentioning the plagiarism accusation. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. She understood. He could see her brilliant mind racing through the same calculations he'd just made. Sterling wants to see a stable company. Marcus kept his voice steady low. Happy employees. Holiday spirit. They want wholesome and traditional. The kind of image that makes them feel good about investing $200 million. What are you suggesting? Her voice carried an edge, a warning that he was about to cross a line he couldn't uncross. But they were already at that line, teetering on the edge. Might as well jump. The mistletoe. We're standing right under it. Sterling is watching. Everyone's watching. Marcus shifted slightly, aware of how close they were standing, how this must already look to everyone in the room. If we kiss right now, this whole conversation looks like something completely different. Not a confrontation. Just two people caught up in the holiday moment. You want me to kiss you to save face in front of investors? Disbelief and something else, curiosity, maybe colored her tone. I want us both to still have jobs tomorrow. His heart was hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat, but he pressed on. Think about it. Robert Sterling sees the CEO and a creative lead sharing a mistletoe kiss at the company party. It's perfect. It humanizes you. Makes Apex look like the kind of place where people actually enjoy working together, where real connections happen. The kind of company Sterling Partners wants to invest in. This is insane. But she wasn't walking away. Her eyes darted past his shoulder, checking Sterling's opposition. He knew she was doing the math, measuring risk against reward. Completely insane, Marcus agreed, but it works. They see holiday romance instead of workplace drama. You buy time to handle the plagiarism question privately without Sterling finding out. Nobody loses except maybe my dignity, and honestly, that's pretty much gone already. A muscle twitched in her jaw. For 3 long seconds, she didn't move, didn't speak. The Christmas music around them felt too loud, and Marcus was suddenly aware of every eye in the room gravitating toward them. The CEO and the guy from creative development standing beneath the mistletoe like they were in some cheesy holiday movie. Then Victoria did something that shocked him more than anything else that night. She smiled. Not her professional smile, the one she used in boardrooms and investor meetings. A real smile that reached her eyes and made her look younger, less guarded, almost vulnerable. If we're doing this, she said quietly, we're doing it right. Make it look real. Before Marcus could process what she meant, her hands came up to rest against his chest. The red folder slipped from her fingers, forgotten on the floor beside them. He felt the warmth of her palms through his shirt, felt his own pulse jump at the contact. His hands moved almost on instinct, settling carefully on her waist. The emerald fabric of her dress felt smooth and expensive under his palms, and he was acutely aware of the curve of her body, the scent of her perfume, something subtle and sophisticated that made him think of winter nights and distant memories. Ready. Her voice carried a tremor he'd never heard before. Nervousness, maybe? Or anticipation? Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. This was supposed to be an act, a performance for the investors watching from across the room, a strategic move to protect both their careers and save the Sterling deal. But as Victoria leaned closer, as her breath touched his face and her eyes locked onto his, everything else in the room seemed to disappear. The music faded. The crowd vanished. The fear about his career and the plagiarism accusation and the blizzard coming and all of it just stopped mattering. Their lips met and the world stopped turning. It was supposed to be quick, professional, just enough to sell the illusion. But the moment their mouths touched, something happened that Marcus hadn't planned for, they couldn't have anticipated. Heat rushed through his chest like wildfire, spreading down his arms and into his fingers, where they pressed against her waist. Victoria's hands tightened on his shirt, her fingers curling into the fabric, and he felt her lean into him, closing that last inch of space between their bodies. The kiss deepened. What started as a careful brush of lips became something more urgent, more real. His hand moved from her waist to the small of her back, pulling her closer without thinking. Her fingers slid up to his collar, and he felt her breath catch against his mouth. Time lost all meaning. Could have been 3 seconds or 3 minutes. All Marcus knew was the taste of wine on her lips, the soft sound she made that only he could hear, the way she fit against him, like they'd done this 1,000 times before instead of never. This wasn't acting. This wasn't strategy. This was something neither of them had admitted they wanted until right now. Then reality crashed back in with the sound of applause erupting around them. Loud and sudden and enthusiastic, pulling them back to the present. Victoria jerked back slightly, her eyes wide with surprise. Marcus's hands were still on her waist. Hers were still tangled in his shirt collar. They stared at each other for a heartbeat, both breathing harder than they should be from a simple kiss. The applause grew louder. People were cheering, whistling completely, buying the spontaneous holiday romance angle. Marcus forced himself to look away from Victoria to remember where they were and why they'd done this. Across the room, Robert Sterling was clapping along with everyone else, a huge grin on his weathered face. The other Sterling Partners executives looked equally delighted, eating up the wholesome Christmas moment. It worked. They'd actually pulled it off. Victoria smoothed down her dress, her professional mask, sliding back into place so fast it made his head spin. 1 second she was a woman who'd just kissed him like her life depended on it. The next she was the CEO again. Cool, controlled, untouchable. "Well," she said, her voice slightly breathless but steady. "That was convincing." "Yeah." Marcus let his hands drop from her waist, immediately missing the contact. "Convincing." Her eyes met his, and for just a moment he saw the same confusion and hunger he was feeling reflected back at him. Then her walls went back up, and she bent to retrieve the red folder from the floor. "My office, 5 minutes." Loud enough for nearby people to hear, establishing the professional boundary again. Then quieter just for him. "We still need to talk about your proposal, and about why that kiss didn't feel like acting at all." She turned and walked away, greeting investors and employees as she moved through the crowd, playing her role perfectly. Marcus stood there beneath the mistletoe, his lips still tingling, his heart still racing, trying to figure out what the hell just happened. His co-worker, Garrett McDonald Mack, from their Marine days together, now working security at Apex, appeared at his elbow holding 2 cups of punch. "Brother, that was smooth." Mack's grin was wide enough to split his face. "How long have you and the Ice Queen been a thing?" "We're not." Marcus said it automatically, but the words felt like a lie. "That was just mistletoe tradition." Mac laughed like Marcus had told a hilarious joke. "Right, sure. That's why she looked at you like you were the only person in the room. That's why I thought I might need to get you to a room." "Mac, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I've never seen her smile like that. Hell, I've never seen her smile, period." Mac wandered off before Marcus could argue, leaving him alone with thoughts he didn't want to examine too closely. The kiss was supposed to be fake, a strategic move to protect the company. But his racing pulse and shaking hands told a different story. 5 minutes, Victoria had said. 5 minutes until he had to walk into her office and pretend that kiss meant nothing. Pretend he wasn't falling for a woman who could fire him with one signature. Pretend the most important thing was clearing his name and saving his job. He finished the punch Mac had brought in 2 swallows, barely tasting it. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Declan Storms, getting worse. "Don't try to drive up here tonight." But Marcus had to. The proof he needed sat in those storage containers at Brennan's house 3 hours north. Without it, Victoria would never believe the truth about his work. The kiss might have bought him time with Sterling, but it hadn't changed the fact that she thought he was a liar. He checked his watch. 3 minutes left. He started walking toward the elevators, weaving through clusters of partying coworkers who had no idea their company's future was balanced on a knife's edge. No idea their CEO had just kissed someone who might be a defraud. No idea that everything could come crashing down before Christmas morning. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like it took hours. Marcus's reflection stared back at him from the polished steel doors. Same suit, same face, but something fundamental had shifted. You couldn't kiss someone like that and pretend it didn't matter. You couldn't feel what he'd felt and just walk away. The doors opened onto the executive floor. Victoria's office waited at the end of a long hallway, light spilling from the doorway into the dim corridor. Every step felt heavier than the last, carrying him closer to a conversation he wasn't ready to have. He knocked once, heard her voice call him in, and stepped across the threshold. Victoria stood in front of her desk, the city lights twinkling behind her through the massive windows. She'd taken off her heels, standing in stockinged feet, somehow looking more formidable without the extra height. The red folder lay open on her desk, damning evidence spread across the polished wood. The door clicked shut behind him, and suddenly the tension between them was suffocating. They were alone. No audience, no performance necessary. Just the two of them and the truth. The content isn't plagiarized. Marcus spoke first, fighting to keep his voice steady despite his racing heart. I created that graphic novel series 6 years ago under a pen name before I moved to the city, before I even knew Apex existed. Victoria's eyebrow lifted slightly, but she didn't interrupt. That was one thing he'd always appreciated about her. She listened, really listened, before making judgments. The independent publisher that bought it was called Crescent Moon Comics. They were small, passionate about experimental storytelling, willing to take risks on unknown creators. They published my series in September 2018, only printed 3,000 copies. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he couldn't break. They went bankrupt 18 months later, and the rights reverted to me automatically. All the documentation, the contracts, the original artwork files, the copyright registration, everything is in storage at my brother Brennan's place upstate. Marcus moved around her desk, slowly keeping his distance but needing her to understand. I didn't think anyone would remember those obscure comics. They barely sold, but I wanted to give them new life, to reach a wider audience with stories that actually matter. Victoria studied him, her green eyes revealing nothing. Why didn't you mention this when you submitted the proposal? The question cut to the heart of it, the shame he'd been carrying for 6 years. Because those comics represent the darkest period of my life. His voice cracked slightly, and he hated himself for it, but honesty demanded vulnerability. I created them right after my wife Sarah died in a car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light, T-boned her car. She died instantly. Our son Declan was 13 years old, had just lost his mother, and he watched me completely fall apart. He looked at the floor, unable to meet Victoria's eyes while admitting his failures. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't function. My brother Brennan forced me to see a counselor at the VA. They diagnosed PTSD, depression, the whole package. The comics were therapy when I couldn't afford an actual therapist. I poured all that grief and rage and pain onto those pages at 3 in the morning when nightmares woke me up. The main character, Adrian, Marcus forced himself to continue. His journey mirrors mine, losing everything, finding a way to keep going, learning that breaking doesn't mean you're broken forever. I wrote about becoming someone new, someone stronger, because Declan needed to see that men can fall apart and still get back up. He finally looked up, met Victoria's gaze. Reed Shadows was the broken version of me, the man drowning in grief who couldn't see past tomorrow. Marcus Hartford is who I rebuilt myself to be. When I found those comics again last year, I saw their value. But I wanted them to represent my second chance, not my rock bottom. So I submitted them under my real name. No mention of the pen name or the history because I was ashamed. Silence filled the office. Victoria's expression had softened slightly, but he couldn't read what she was thinking. Then she spoke, and her voice was quieter than before. I almost fired you. I had the termination papers drafted. They're in my bag right now. His stomach dropped, but before he could respond, her phone buzzed loudly on the desk. She glanced at it, and her entire demeanor changed, shifting from uncertain to sharp in an instant. Sterling Partners executives are thrilled with the holiday spirit at the party. She read from the screen, something like disbelief coloring her tone. They want to fast-track the major partnership announcement. Robert Sterling himself is asking which creative initiative we're leading with. They want something that shows heart community values, family appeal. She looked up at Marcus, and he realized his professional fate hung in the balance of her next decision. His graphic novel series fits Sterling's requirements, perfectly meaningful content about rebuilding after loss, finding strength in community family values wrapped in compelling storytelling. But only if she believed him. I need proof. Victoria set her phone down with deliberate care. If what you're saying is true, I need to see the original work, the contracts, the artwork files, everything. Relief washed over Marcus like cold water. She wasn't saying no. She was giving him a chance. My brother Brennan has everything in storage at his house. I can drive there tonight and be back by morning. It's about 3 hours north near Grafton, just past the Adirondack foothills. Victoria immediately pulled up her phone again, swiping through screens. The Weather Service just issued a blizzard warning for the northern counties. They're saying it could drop 8 inches by midnight, 12 to 15 by morning. Travel not advised. I have to try. Desperation bled into his words, but he didn't care anymore about maintaining distance or professional boundaries. For my career, yes. For my integrity, absolutely. But Victoria, he took a step closer. I need you to know I would never lie to you. Not about this. Not about anything. The intensity in his words hung in the air between them like smoke, carrying implications he hadn't meant to reveal. Her eyes widened slightly, and he knew she understood this wasn't just about work anymore. Hadn't been since that kiss under the mistletoe. Victoria turned toward the window, staring out at the city lights for what felt like an eternity. When she turned back, there was something different in her eyes. A decision made. I'll come with you. Marcus blinked. What? 2 people searching will be faster than 1. She moved to the closet in the corner of her office, pulling out a go-bag he hadn't known she kept there. And honestly, if I'm going to stake my reputation on this project, I need to see the evidence myself. Not because I don't trust you. She paused, meeting his eyes. But because if this goes to court or the board questions my judgment, I need firsthand verification. It's dangerous, the storm. I didn't build this company by playing it safe. Victoria started changing, swapping her dress for jeans and a sweater she kept for overnight work sessions. Besides, you just convinced Robert Sterling we're romantically involved. If I stay here while you drive into a blizzard alone, that story falls apart. But if we go together, she pulled on hiking boots. That looks like dedication, partnership, the kind of relationship Sterling wants to see. Marcus knew he should argue more, should protect her from the risk. But the truth was simpler and more selfish. He wanted her there. Wanted her to see the proof with her own eyes. Wanted more time in her presence, even if it meant driving into a storm. My truck has winter gear, emergency supplies. I was a Marine. I know how to handle bad weather driving. Then we leave now before the worst of the storm hits. Victoria grabbed her coat, all business again. We get the evidence we get back, and we present it to the board before Derek Walsh has time to push his agenda. The mention of Derek sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Victoria's VP of Operations had been vocal about opposing the Sterling deal from the start. If Derek found out about the plagiarism accusation while Victoria was unreachable, "You think Derek's behind the leak?" Marcus asked. "I think Derek wants the Sterling deal to fail so he can push his titanium media partnership instead. And your project is the flagship of the Sterling deal." Victoria's eyes were cold, calculating. Kill your project, kill Sterling's interest. But we're not going to let that happen. They rode the elevator down in tense silence. The parking garage was nearly empty, most employees still at the party upstairs. Marcus led her to his Ford F-150, older but well-maintained, the bed loaded with emergency gear. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "You really were prepared." "Always." He opened the passenger door for her, waited until she was settled, then climbed into the driver's seat. His phone rang as he started the engine. Declan's name on the screen. "Hey, kid? Dad, please tell me you're not driving up to Uncle Brennan's tonight?" His son's voice carried that mix of concern and exasperation that only teenagers could manage. "The weather's getting bad fast." "I have to, Declan. It's important for work." A pause, then, "This is about your comics, isn't it?" "Someone found out about Reed Shadows." Marcus glanced at Victoria, who was politely pretending not to listen. "Yeah, someone did. and they're making it look like I stole work instead of creating it. That's bullshit. Declan rarely cursed, which meant he was genuinely angry. Those comics are yours. You created them when he stopped himself. When your mom died, I know, and that's why I need to prove it. Marcus kept his voice gentle. Listen, I'll be careful, I promise. And I'll call you in the morning. Dad, Declan's voice softened. Sometimes a man's got to do what's right even when it's hard. You taught me that. So go do what's right. Just be safe, okay? Emotion clogged Marcus's throat. His son had grown up too fast, forced into maturity by loss. But hearing him echo back the values Marcus had tried to instill made everything worth it. I love you, kid. Merry Christmas. Love you too, Dad. Merry Christmas. He ended the call to find Victoria watching him with an unreadable expression. Your son sounds like a good kid. The best. Marcus pulled out of the parking garage into the cold December night. Declan's at MIT's second year, double major in engineering and physics. Smarter than I ever was. You raised him alone after your wife died. With my brother's help. Brennan moved in with us for the first year, made sure we didn't fall apart completely. Marcus merged onto the highway heading north. But yeah, mostly just Declan and me figuring it out together. Some days were better than others. Snow was already falling, light flurries that caught in the headlights. The forecast predicted it would get much worse. Victoria was quiet for a moment, then, tell me about the graphic novels. What inspired them beyond the personal grief? So Marcus talked about creating a character named Adrian who lost everything in a single-day job, home identity, and had to rebuild from nothing. About exploring how loss strips away everything superficial until only the core of who you are remains. About finding unexpected community among other broken people, learning that strength comes from vulnerability, that rebuilding isn't about becoming who you were before, but discovering who you can be now. It's about second chances at midlife. Marcus kept his eyes on the road as snow began falling heavier. About learning that 47 isn't too old to start over. That failure doesn't define you unless you let it. That sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the foundation for something better. He could feel Victoria's gaze on him, intense and searching. Is that what you believe? That the worst things can become foundations? I have to believe it. Simple truth. Because if Sarah's death was just meaningless tragedy, if losing everything was just bad luck, then what's the point? But if I can take that pain and turn it into something that helps other people feel less alone? He shrugged. Then maybe it meant something after all. Silence stretched between them, but it felt different now. Less awkward, more contemplative. Then Victoria spoke, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. I spent 10 years in foster care. 14 different homes between age 8 and 18. Never stayed anywhere long enough to feel like I belonged. Marcus glanced at her, surprised she was sharing. Victoria Blackwell was famous for her privacy, for keeping everyone at arm's length. The longest I stayed was 11 months. The Hendersons when I was 15. They seemed nice, stable. I started to hope they might adopt me. She stared out the windshield at the swirling snow. Then Mr. Henderson lost his job. They couldn't afford to keep me anymore. Social worker picked me up on a Tuesday afternoon. I never saw them again. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me the most important lesson. The only person you can count on is yourself. She turned to look at him. I built Apex from nothing because I learned early that nobody's going to hand you anything. You want success, security, a life that means something. You take it, you fight for it, you sacrifice everything else to keep it. Is that why you work 80-hour weeks? Why you never mention having any friends outside the office? Victoria's jaw tightened. I have friends. Do you? Marcus kept his tone gentle, not accusatory. Or do you have professional contacts and networking opportunities disguised as friendship? That's none of your business. You're right, it's not. He focused on the road where visibility was dropping as snow fell heavier. But for what it's worth, I understand. After Sarah died, I threw myself into being a single parent, poured everything into making sure Declan was okay, that he had stability, even though his world had fallen apart. I didn't date, didn't socialize, just work and dad duty, nothing else. How long has it been? 6 years. The admission felt heavy. I haven't been on a date, haven't even thought about another woman since the day Sarah died. It felt like a betrayal somehow. Like if I moved on, I was saying she didn't matter. That's not how it works. Victoria's voice carried unexpected warmth. Moving forward isn't the same as forgetting. Your wife would want you to be happy. Yeah, probably. Marcus tightened his grip on the wheel. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two different things. More silence. The highway stretched ahead of them, increasingly covered in white. Traffic was light. Most people had sense enough to stay home on Christmas Eve with a blizzard warning in effect. Marcus checked his mirrors and tensed, headlights behind them maintaining exact distance despite the worsening conditions. A black SUV with tinted windows. He'd noticed it when they left Manhattan, thought it was coincidence. But it had followed them through two-lane changes and matched his speed adjustments perfectly. Professional tail. Someone was following them. Victoria noticed his change in demeanor. What's wrong? He debated, lying protecting her from worry. But honesty had gotten them this far. We're being followed. Black Suburban about 50 yards back. Been there since we left the city. She turned to look, and the SUV immediately dropped back, creating more distance. Smart. Professional. You're sure combat deployments teach you to spot tails? Marcus kept his voice calm despite rising tension. They're maintaining exact distance, matching speed changes. That's not accident. Victoria pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. I'm logging into Apex server remotely, checking who accessed your proposal file. While she worked, Marcus kept monitoring the SUV in his mirrors. Whoever was driving knew what they were doing, staying far enough back to avoid obvious detection, but close enough to track their route. Derek Walsh. Victoria's voice went cold. He's accessed your proposal file 17 times in the past 4 weeks. Why would a VP of operations need to review a creative proposal 17 times? What else does his calendar show? She scrolled cross-referencing. Block time listed as private meetings. But when I check phone logs, and her eyes widen. Multiple calls to unknown numbers. One matches a Wall Street Journal reporter's cell. Marcus's hands clenched the wheel. He's shopping the story, trying to break it before we can respond. His phone rang, Mac's name on the screen. Marcus hit speaker. Brother, I dug into Derek Walsh like you asked. Mac's voice crackled over the connection, slightly distorted by worsening weather. Your VP's been busy. He's contacted Titanium Media, Dark Horse Comics, even Netflix, trying to shop your Shattered City concept around. He's trying to steal it. Marcus couldn't believe the audacity. Worse, he's trying to option it elsewhere. But when they all wanted to meet the original creator, he got desperate. Couldn't produce you without revealing he didn't actually own the rights. Mac paused. Sabotaging you was his way out. Kill your project, kill the Sterling deal that blocks his Titanium partnership. Victoria's expression went from cold to Arctic. He's trying to destroy my company's future for his own agenda. Looks that way. And boss, Mac's tone shifted to serious. Be careful. Derek's got resources. If he's willing to commit fraud and sabotage, he might go further. The call ended. Marcus and Victoria sat in charged silence as snow began falling in earnest, heavy enough that the wipers struggled to keep the windshield clear. We should call the police, Victoria said, and tell them that we suspect corporate espionage based on server logs. They'll tell us to hire a lawyer and handle it Monday. Marcus shook his head. We need the physical evidence first. Proof that destroys his narrative before he can spin it. The evidence that's 3 hours away in a blizzard. 2 hours if the roads stay clear, which was looking increasingly unlikely. Visibility dropped below 50 feet. The highway was covered in white lane markers disappearing beneath accumulating snow. Marcus slowed to 40 miles per hour, then 35, focusing completely on keeping them safe. The SUV behind them maintained its distance, a dark shape barely visible through the curtain of falling snow. Marcus's phone buzzed. Text from Declan. Dad, weather service. Just upgraded to blizzard warning. Uncle Brennan says his road isn't plowed. Please turn around. He didn't respond. Couldn't. They were committed now. Tell me about your divorce. Marcus wanted to keep Victoria talking, keep both their minds off the deteriorating conditions. You mentioned your ex-husband stole from the company. Victoria was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then Richard Langford, old money Connecticut family, all the right credentials, charming as hell. We met at a charity gala 6 years ago. I thought, she trailed off. I thought he saw me. The real me, not just the CEO or the success story. I was wrong. What happened? He married me for access. To my money, my connections, my company. 18 months after the wedding, where I discovered he'd been funneling funds from Apex into offshore accounts. $2 million over 15 months. Her voice stayed flat, emotionless, but Marcus heard the pain underneath. I had to repay every penny to keep the company solvent. Liquidated my personal assets, took out loans, worked 100-hour weeks for 2 years to recover. The board blamed you. Of course they did. Said I should have known, should have been more careful about who I let into my life. Bitterness crept in now. They were right. I was an idiot. I let my guard down, let myself want something personal, and it nearly destroyed everything I'd built. Marcus understood now why she was so closed off, so unwilling to trust. She'd been betrayed by the one person who should have protected her. He was a con artist. Marcus kept his voice gentle. That wasn't your fault. You didn't fail at judgment. He succeeded at deception. There's a difference. Is there? Victoria turned to look at him. Because from where I'm sitting, I made a choice to trust someone, and that choice almost cost me everything. Just like you trusting that nobody would remember obscure indie comics is costing you now. That's different. Is it? We both let our guards down. We both paid the price. Maybe. Marcus navigated around a slower car struggling in the snow. Or maybe the lesson isn't never trust anyone. Maybe it's be more careful who you trust. Not everyone is Richard. Not everyone will betray you. How do you know the difference? You don't. Not for sure. He met her eyes briefly before returning attention to the road. But if you never trust anyone, you guarantee you'll be alone. Sometimes you have to take the risk. Like you risked submitting those comics under your real name. Like that, yeah, didn't work out great. Or like kissing your boss under Mistletoe to save a business deal. Marcus's breath caught. That was different. Was it? Her voice dropped lower, intimate, despite the storm raging around them. Because it felt like more than strategy. It felt... She stopped herself. Real, Marcus finished. It felt real. We shouldn't... I know. You work for me. There are policies, power dynamics, 1,000 reasons why this is a terrible idea. I know that too. Marcus kept his eyes on the road, but every nerve in his body was aware of her presence. But that doesn't change what I felt when I kissed you. Silence stretched between them, thick with possibility and danger. Then the road curved sharply ahead, the turn appearing suddenly through the whiteout conditions. Marcus saw it 2 seconds too late, already entering the curve at 30 miles per hour, too fast for the ice beneath the snow. He touched the brakes instinctively, immediately knew it was the wrong move. The tires lost grip. The truck started sliding rotation, beginning as physics took over. Victoria gasped, one hand gripping the dashboard. Marcus's military training kicked in, overriding panic. Turn into the slide, don't fight it. Find the friction. The world spun. Trees appeared in the headlights, then disappeared. The guardrail flashed past. The road tilted and rotated as the truck did a complete 180, then kept going. 270 degrees of rotation, everything in slow motion, yet happening so fast. The truck slid backward toward the guardrail, and Marcus had one crystal clear thought. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm sorry I couldn't keep us safe. Then the truck stopped, engine coughing and dying, facing the wrong direction on the highway. 18 inches from the guardrail, close enough to see snow accumulated on the metal. Complete silence except for the wind howling outside and both of them breathing hard. Are you hurt? Marcus's hands were still on the wheel, knuckles white. Victoria, are you hurt? I know, I don't think so. Her voice shook. Are you? He took inventory. Minor cut on his forehead from hitting the steering wheel. Nothing else. I'm okay. We're okay. But they weren't. The engine wouldn't restart, just clicking sounds when he turned the key. Marcus grabbed his flashlight, popped the hood despite the snow pouring in. Victoria waited while he checked, already knowing what he'd find. The alternator belt had snapped during the spin, probably whipped off by the rotation. The battery wouldn't charge. And the coolant hose had cracked, leaking fluid that was already freezing in the Arctic air. He climbed back into the cab, covered in snow, shivering. We're not going anywhere in this truck. Victoria pulled out her phone, one bar of signal flickering. I'll call. The signal died before she could dial. They sat in the dead truck as wind rocked it and temperature inside the cab began dropping rapidly without the heater. Marcus made the decision quickly. We can't stay here. The cab will be below freezing in an hour. We need shelter. There's nothing out here. There was a building about a quarter-mile back. I saw lights through the snow. He grabbed his emergency pack from behind the seat. It's our only option. Victoria didn't argue. They both knew he was right. Marcus pulled out thermal blankets, extra clothes, the 2 road flares he'd packed. Put these on, extra socks, gloves. We'll light 1 flare and leave it on the truck to mark our position. Second one stays with us. You've done this before. Survival training. It's about to pay off. He met her eyes, seeing fear but also determination. Stay close to me. If we get separated in this visibility, we might not find each other. Understand? She nodded. They stepped out into the blizzard, and the cold hit like a physical assault. Wind at 40 miles per hour, snow so thick Marcus could barely see 5 feet ahead. He lit the flare, placed it on the truck roof, then grabbed Victoria's hand. Don't let go, he shouted over the wind. They started walking into the white hell, leaving their disabled truck behind. Each step was a battle against wind, trying to knock them down. Snow stung exposed skin like needles. Victoria stumbled and Marcus caught her, kept her upright, kept them moving. He glanced back once, seeing the flare's red glow already fading into the storm, and behind that barely visible, the black SUV that had been following them. Parked on the shoulder. Lights off, engine off, just watching, letting them struggle. Marcus said nothing to Victoria. She was frightened enough. They pushed forward into the blizzard, 2 people fighting the storm for survival with a quarter-mile of white hell between them and uncertain shelter. If they made it, the quarter-mile felt like 10. Marcus kept his arm locked around Victoria's shoulders, guiding her through wind that tried to rip them apart. Snow drove into their faces with such force that breathing required turning away from the blast. Every step forward was a negotiation with physics and willpower. Victoria's boots were too large, borrowed from his emergency kit. She kept stumbling, catching herself on his arm, pushing forward with determination that impressed him even through the fear. Her fingers dug into his jacket, holding on like she understood that separation meant death. Keep talking to me. Marcus had to shout directly into her ear to be heard over the howling. I need to know you're alert. What should I say? Her voice came back thin, strained. Anything. Tell me about your first day at Apex. She laughed, a sound swallowed immediately by wind. You want small talk while we freeze? I want to keep your mind working. Hypothermia starts with confusion. Talk. So she did. Told him about walking into Apex 15 years ago as a receptionist with a state college degree and $300 in her bank account. How the CEO at the time, Eleanor Pierce, who'd become her mentor, noticed her staying late to study financial reports. How Eleanor had taken a chance on an ambitious foster kid with more hunger than credentials. Marcus listened, using her voice as an anchor while scanning the white void for any sign of the building he'd glimpsed. His face was numb, fingers burning despite gloves. The thermal blanket helped but wasn't enough. They had maybe 20 minutes before serious frostbite became a concern. Victoria stumbled hard, her foot catching on something buried beneath snow. Marcus caught her before she went down, held her upright while she found her balance. My hands. She could barely form the words. Can't feel them. Marcus stopped, forced her to face him, pulled off his gloves. Give me your hands. She did, and he saw her fingers were pale, borderline dangerous. He rubbed them between his palms, generating friction heat, then tucked them inside his jacket against his chest. We have to keep moving. But he held her there for 30 seconds, letting his body heat revive circulation in her extremities. Can you make your hands into fists? She tried. Succeeded. Nodded. Good. We're almost there. I promise you, Victoria. I'll get us somewhere safe. Her eyes met his, trust and fear mingling in equal measure. Then she pulled her hands back, flexed her fingers, and they pushed forward again. 5 more minutes of hell. Then through the white chaos, Marcus spotted it, golden light spilling onto snow. A building small and rustic, Christmas decorations glowing warm against the storm's fury. There. He pointed, and Victoria's entire body sagged with relief. They covered the final 100 yards, stumbling more than walking, exhaustion, and cold sapping strength they'd already spent. A wooden sign hung above the entrance, swinging violently in the wind. Pine Ridge Inn. Marcus pounded on the door with numb fists, not caring about politeness or propriety. They needed shelter. Now, the door opened before he could knock again. An elderly woman stood in the doorway, white hair pulled into a bun, concern etched deep in her weathered face. Dear God in heaven, she pulled them inside with weird hesitation. Get in here before you freeze solid. The warmth hit like a wall, painful after the brutal cold. Marcus's face burned as circulation returned. Victoria was shaking so hard she could barely stand. The innkeeper, her name tag read. Martha guided them both toward a massive stone fireplace dominating the small lobby. Flames roared inside it, heat radiating in waves that felt miraculous. Sit, both of you. Martha disappeared into a back room, returned with blankets and steaming mugs. Hot chocolate with a touch of a whiskey, doctor's orders, and I'm old enough that counts. Marcus wrapped his hands around the mug, feeling slowly returning to fingers that had gone wooden. Victoria sat beside him on the hearth, close enough that their shoulders touched. Neither of them moved apart. You two could have died out there. Martha studied them with sharp eyes that had seen plenty of foolish decisions. Storm came on faster than predicted, caught a lot of folks by surprise. You got somewhere local you're headed. My brother's place in Grafton. Marcus managed through chattering teeth. Our truck went off the road about a mile south. Black ice. You won't reach Grafton tonight. Maybe not tomorrow either. Martha shook her head. Roads are impassable. State police just called saying all highways north are closed. Victoria's hand found Marcus's beneath the blanket. Squeezed once, they'd have to wait out the storm, get the evidence in the morning, race back to the city. Hope Derek didn't make his move before they could respond. Marcus's phone showed one bar of service flickering. He tried calling Brennan, no answer. I need to tend to that. Martha gestured to Marcus's forehead where blood had dried from the earlier cut. Can't have guests bleeding all over my nice clean inn. While Martha cleaned the wound with gentle efficiency, Victoria moved to the window. Snow obscured everything beyond the glass, just white upon white, stretching into darkness. The SUV that was following us. Her voice was quiet. Do you think they're still out there? Probably waiting to see if we make it. Or hoping we don't. Marcus winced as Martha applied antiseptic. Either way, we're safe here. They can't do anything while we're inside. You're sure about that? He wasn't, but saying so would only add to her fear. Martha finished bandaging, stepped back to examine her work. You'll live. Now about rooms. She looked apologetic. Storm brought everyone and their mother to my doorstep. I've got one room left. Queen bed fireplace, clean sheets. But it's the last one. Marcus and Victoria exchanged glances. The implications settled between them, heavy as the snow outside. We'll take it. Victoria spoke first, her tone matter-of-fact despite the flush creeping up her neck. We just need somewhere warm and dry. Martha led them upstairs, chattering about the history of the inn, while Marcus tried not to think about sharing a bed with his boss. The woman he'd kissed hours ago. The woman he'd been half in love with for months without admitting it. The room was small but immaculate. Log walls, thick quilts on the bed, a fireplace already burning low. A window showed nothing but the storm's rage. Bathrooms through there, extra towels in the cabinet. Martha paused at the door. Storm should break by dawn. You two get some rest. Merry Christmas. The door closed, leaving them alone. Marcus stood by the fireplace, suddenly aware of how small the room was, how large the bed seemed, how Victoria was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. I'll take the floor. He gestured to the hardwood. You take the bed. Don't be ridiculous. She pulled off her wet coat, hung it by the fire to dry. That floor is freezing, and you just saved both our lives getting us here. We're adults. We can share a bed without it meaning anything. But they both knew it would mean something. Had already meant something since that kiss. Marcus's phone rang, cutting through the tension. Derek Walsh's name on the screen. He put it on speaker. Walsh. Hartford. Derek's voice carried false concern. Just heard you and Victoria had some car trouble. Everything all right? How did Derek know about the accident? They'd told no one except Mac. We're fine. Waiting out the storm at an inn. An inn. Together. A pause loaded with insinuation. That's cozy. Listen, the board scheduled an emergency meeting for tomorrow at 8 a.m. They want to discuss the plagiarism allegations before the Sterling presentation. Victoria's eyes went cold. I didn't authorize an emergency meeting. Board Chair Margaret Voss did. Given the severity of the allegations and your unavailability, she felt it necessary. Derek's satisfaction bled through the phone. Of course, if you can't make it back in time, we'll have to proceed without you. Unfortunate timing, really. The meeting will wait until I return. Victoria's voice could have frozen the blizzard outside. I'm still CEO Derek. The board doesn't move without my approval. Actually, according to the bylaws, the chair can call emergency sessions when the CEO is incapacitated or unreachable. You're currently both. Triumph now barely disguised. But I'm sure you'll make it back. The Sterling executives are very interested in how we handle this ethical situation. The call ended. Marcus stared at the phone fury building in his chest. He orchestrated this. The leak, the timing, everything. He needed you out of the city while he makes his play. Then we give him what he wants. Victoria pulled out her own phone, fingers flying. I'm calling Eleanor Pierce. She's on the board and she trusts my judgment. If I can get her to delay the vote, no signal. Her phone showed nothing. Marcus checked his. Same. The storm must have taken out the cell tower. They were cut off, stranded. Exactly what Derek had planned. Victoria moved to the window, staring out at the white void. Marcus watched her shoulders tense, saw her fighting to maintain composure. We'll get back in time. He moved to stand beside her. Soon as the storm breaks, we get to Brennan's, grab the evidence, and we're back in the city by noon. You'll be at that meeting before Derek can make his move. You're very confident for a man whose truck is buried in a snowbank. I'm a man who's survived worse. He touched her shoulder gently. Trust me. She turned to face him, and suddenly they were too close. Close enough to feel the heat radiating between them. Close enough that he could count the gold flecks in her green eyes. That kiss earlier. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Was any of it real for you? Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. This was the question that mattered. The one that would change everything or nothing depending on his answer. Every second of it was real. The words came out rough, honest. I've wanted to kiss you since the day you interviewed me 8 months ago. Since you challenged at every assumption I made and pushed me to create something better. Since you stayed late, not because you had to, but because you cared about making work that mattered. He took a breath, committed fully. I fell for the woman who'd rather drive through a blizzard than let an innocent person suffer. Who built an empire from nothing and still remembers what it's like to have nothing. Every part of that kiss was real. I just had to disguise it as strategy because I never thought you'd see me as anything more than an employee. Victoria's hand came up, touching his jaw with fingers still cold from the storm. Show me. Show me what it would be like if we weren't boss and employee. If we were just two people stranded in a snowstorm with nothing to lose. Marcus closed the distance between them, his hands finding her waist and pulling her against him. This kiss was nothing like the one under the mistletoe. That had been careful, measured, performed for an audience. This was raw and honest and full of 8 months of wanting and wondering. Victoria's fingers tangled in his hair, and he felt something break open inside his chest. Something he'd kept locked away for 6 years, convinced he'd never feel this way about anyone after Sarah. The guilt tried to surface, guilt for moving on, for wanting someone new, but Victoria's mouth on his pushed it away. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. This is complicated. Victoria's voice shook slightly. You work for me. There are policies, power dynamics, 1,000 ways this could go wrong. I know. Marcus pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. But I'd rather have one honest night with you than a lifetime of pretending I don't feel this way. She studied his face, searching for something. Truth, maybe, or permission to want what he was offering. I haven't been with anyone since my divorce. The admission cost her, he could tell. 5 years of convincing myself I was better off alone, that wanting someone, trusting someone, was just setting myself up for another betrayal. I get it. 6 years for me. 6 years of thinking I died with Sarah, that the part of me capable of feeling this way was gone forever. He took her hand, laced their fingers together. But you make me feel alive again. Like maybe 47 isn't too old for a second chance. 43. Her lips curved in a small smile. And terrified. Me too. They stood there, hands clasped, teetering on the edge of a decision that would change everything. Then Victoria made the choice. Reached up, pulled his mouth back to hers, and this time there was no hesitation. No holding back. They moved to the bed, kissing becoming more urgent. Marcus's hands explored carefully, reverently, mapping the curves of her body through layers of clothing. Victoria pulled at his shirt, tugging it free, her palms sliding across his chest. Wait, she pulled back, breathless. If we do this, if we cross this line, there's no going back. Everything becomes complicated. Your job, my position, how people see us. I know. Marcus cupped her face gently. And I'm choosing this anyway. Choosing you. Whatever complications come, we face them together. She searched his eyes, looking for doubt or hesitation. Found none. I need you to understand something. Victoria's voice went soft, vulnerable in a way he'd never heard. I don't know how to do this. Relationships, letting someone in, being vulnerable. I'll probably mess it up. Then we'll mess it up together. He kissed her forehead, her cheek, her mouth. I'll probably work too much. Get jealous when board members take your time. Worry I'm not good enough for a CEO. We'll both make mistakes, but we'll talk about them, fix them, choose each other anyway. That seemed to be what she needed to hear. The permission to be imperfect. The promise that one mistake wouldn't end everything. What happened next was tender and intense and meaningful in ways that had nothing to do with physical pleasure. This was two lonely people finding connection. Two wounded souls taking a risk on healing together. Two hearts that had been closed for so long finally opening up. Afterward, they lay tangled in blankets while the fire burned low and the storm raged outside. Victoria's head rested on Marcus's chest, her fingers tracing patterns across his skin. Tell me about Sarah. She spoke quietly, not demanding, but offering space if he wanted it. Most people avoided mentioning his dead wife, acted like acknowledging her existence would somehow hurt him. But Victoria understood that Sarah was part of his story, that pretending otherwise was disrespectful to both of them. She was my opposite in every way. Marcus stared at the ceiling, remembering. I was serious, focused, always planning 3 steps ahead. Sarah lived in the moment, laughed at everything, found joy in the smallest things. He felt Victoria listening, not interrupting, just present. We met in college. She was studying art history, I was doing architecture. She'd sit in the campus coffee shop sketching people, and one day she sketched me. Showed me this drawing where I looked less uptight, more human. Said that's who I really was under all the planning and control. She sounds wonderful. She was. She kept me grounded when I got too caught up in career ambitions. Reminded me that life was happening while I was busy making plans. Marcus's voice roughened. When the architecture firm collapsed and I lost everything, she never wavered. Just said we'd figure it out together. And we did. Started rebuilding, moved in with Brennan, took whatever work we could find. What happened the day she died? Tuesday afternoon, she'd gone to the grocery store, just ordinary errands. The memory still hurt, would probably always hurt. Drunk driver ran a red light going 50 in a residential zone. Witnesses said Sarah never saw it coming. The impact killed her instantly. Victoria's hand found his squeezed. Declan was at school. I had to pick him up, take him home, and tell my 13-year-old son that his mother was never coming back. Marcus blinked against the burn in his eyes. He asked me if it was his fault, if he'd done something wrong, and I had to explain that sometimes terrible things just happen. No reason, no justice, just random cruelty. How did you survive it? Barely. The first year was a blur of grief counseling and barely functioning. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything except how unfair it was that she was gone. That Declan grew up without his mother, that I'd never hear her laugh again. He paused, gathering himself. The VA counselor suggested art therapy. I couldn't paint or sketch like Sarah did, but I could draw comics. Started creating this character named Adrian, who'd lost everything in a single day. Poured all my rage and grief and pain into those pages at 3 in the morning when nightmares woke me up. The comics saved you. They gave me a reason to keep fighting. Every panel I drew was proof I was still alive, still trying. And Declan would see them, sometimes would read the pages where Adrian found the strength to keep going. I think it helped him too. Showed him that men can break and still heal. Victoria shifted, propping herself up to look at him. Is that why you used a pen name Reed Shadows instead of Marcus Hartford? Reed was my middle name. Shadows because that's what I was living in back then. Just a shadow of the person I used to be. He met her eyes. When I found those comics again last year, I saw their value. But I wanted to submit them as Marcus Hartford, the man who survived and rebuilt. Not Reed Shadows, the broken version who created them. You were never broken. Her voice carried absolute certainty. You were healing. There's a difference. Something loosened in Marcus's chest, a knot he'd been carrying for 6 years. Victoria saw his past, his failures, his grief, and she didn't flinch, didn't judge, just accepted it as part of who he was. Tell me about Richard. Fair was fair. What made you fall for him? Victoria settled back against his chest, her breath warm on his skin. He was everything I thought I wanted. Sophisticated, successful, from one of those old Connecticut families where everyone goes to Yale and summers in the Hamptons. The complete opposite of foster care. Exactly. He represented stability, belonging, a family name and history, all the things I never had. Bitterness crept into her tone. Took me 18 months to realize he didn't want me. He wanted my money, my company, my connections. I was just a means to an end. When did you find out about the embezzlement? Routine audit, the forensic accountant noticed irregularities in our investment accounts. Followed the trail straight to Richard's offshore holdings. She laughed without humor. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was realizing I'd been so desperate to belong somewhere that I ignored every red flag, his sudden interest in company finances, the way he'd charm board members at events, how he always had excuses when I wanted to discuss our future. Marcus held her tighter, wishing he could go back and protect her from that betrayal. The board blamed me, said I should have known, should have been more careful about mixing business and personal life. Victoria's voice went flat. They were right. I let my guard down and it nearly destroyed everything I'd built. They were wrong. Marcus spoke with quiet intensity. Richard was a con artist. That wasn't your failure, that was his crime. You didn't make a mistake by trusting someone you loved. He made a choice to betray that trust. The guilt belongs to him. She was quiet for a long moment. No one's ever said that to me before. Then everyone else is wrong too. Victoria shifted to look at him again, something soft and vulnerable in her expression. I'm scared of this, of us, of what happens when we go back to the real world and face the complications. We face them together. Marcus cupped her face thumb, stroking her cheek. We follow the rules, file the relationship disclosure with HR. I transfer to a different department, so you're not my direct supervisor. We do everything by the book, so no one can question your integrity. And if it doesn't work, if I'm too damaged for a real relationship, then we'll figure it out. Together. One day at a time. He kissed her softly. But Victoria, for what it's worth, you're not damaged. You're careful. There's a difference, and careful is smart when you've been hurt before. Her eyes shone with unshed tears. How are you real? How are you this understanding? Because I know what it's like to be afraid of moving forward, to feel like wanting something good means betraying the past. Marcus brushed a strand of hair from her face. Sarah used to say that strength isn't avoiding pain. Strength is choosing to hope again after you've been hurt, choosing to trust again after betrayal. That's the kind of strength that matters. She was right. She usually was. They kissed again, slower this time, less desperate, more tender, making promises with touch that words couldn't quite capture. When they finally settled into sleep, wrapped around each other, while the storm battered the windows, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in 6 years. Peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of hope that better days were coming. His last thought before drifting off was that Sarah would have liked Victoria, would have approved of him taking this risk, would have wanted him to be happy. Marcus woke to pale light filtering through the window. The storm had stopped. Snow covered everything outside in pristine white, the world reborn and silent. Victoria still slept, her face peaceful in the dawn glow. Marcus carefully extracted himself, not wanting to wake her. His phone showed 5:30 a.m. and 2 bars of service. 3 missed calls from Declan, 2 from Mac, 1 voicemail from Brennan. He stepped into the hallway, closing the door quietly, and called his brother. About time. Brennan's voice was rough with exhaustion. Just got off a 12-hour shift at the hospital. Roads are still bad, but passable with four-wheel drive. You making it up here? Yeah, we're at Pine Ridge, in about 40 minutes south of you. Our truck's disabled, but we'll rent something when we get to town. The storage unit in my basement. Brennan paused. There was some water damage last month. Pipe leaked. I mentioned it to Declan, thought he'd tell you. Marcus's stomach dropped. How bad? Some boxes got wet before I noticed. I dried everything out, but Brennan sounded apologetic. Paper documents might be damaged. I didn't know which ones were important. The contracts, the proof of his ownership, potentially ruined. I'll be there by then. Marcus kept his voice steady despite rising panic. Thanks for the heads up. He ended the call and stood in the empty hallway, mind racing. If the contracts were damaged beyond recognition, he'd have no physical proof of ownership. The notary logs were the backup plan, but would Victoria accept going further out of their way when Derek was making moves back in the city? His phone buzzed. Text from Mac. Derek's calling in favors. Board meeting moved up to 12:30. He's claiming you and Victoria are compromised. Got maybe 6 hours before this goes sideways. 6 hours to get to Brennan's, find whatever evidence survived, potentially track down the notary for backup documentation, and make it back to Manhattan for a board meeting. Impossible, unless they got very lucky. Victoria emerged from the room dressed and ready. One look at his face told her something had changed. What happened? He explained about the water damage, the accelerated timeline, the 6-hour window. She didn't hesitate. Then we move fast. Rent the best four-wheel drive available. Get to your brother's. If the documents are too damaged, we find another way to prove ownership. There is another way. The notary who certified the contracts, Barbara Yates. She keeps logs by law. 7 years minimum retention. Marcus pulled up a search on his phone. She's still practicing. Office in Hoosick Falls, about 30 miles from Brennan's. Then that's our backup plan. Victoria was already moving, pulling on her coat. First Brennan's. If the contracts are salvageable, great. If not, we go to the notary. Either way, we're back in the city by noon. They found Martha downstairs, already serving coffee and fresh cinnamon rolls to stranded guests. Storm clear, just like I said. She poured them both coffee. Roads are bad, but passable. Local garage has a few rentals if you need one. Tell them Martha sent you. 20 minutes later, they were in a Jeep Cherokee with four-wheel drive and winter tires heading north on roads covered in packed snow. Marcus drove. Victoria navigated, both of them silent and focused. The drive took 50 minutes instead of the usual 30. They pulled up to Brennan's cabin just after 7 a.m. Brennan met them at the door, still in scrubs from his overnight shift. He looked between Marcus and Victoria, raised an eyebrow, but said nothing about the obvious intimacy between them. Basement storage is this way. The plastic bins were organized and labeled. Marcus found the one marked 2018 Comics and Contracts immediately. Opened it with hands that shook slightly. The comics were fine, protected by plastic sleeves, the artwork pristine. But the contracts with Crescent Moon Comics were water-stained. Ink had run in places. Signatures were partially illegible. The copyright registration documents were worse. Some pages stuck together, text blurred beyond recognition. This isn't enough. Victoria examined them carefully. A lawyer could argue these were tampered with, that the water damage is convenient cover for forgery. Then we go to the notary. Marcus was already repacking the good items, the comics themselves, the salvageable portions of contracts. Barbara Yates has the legal logs. Those are ironclad. They thanked Brennan, promised to explain everything later, and were back in the Jeep by 7:45. The drive to Hoosick Falls took another 40 minutes through increasingly rural terrain. Small town population, maybe 3,000. Main Street looked like a postcard from 1950. Barbara Yates Notary, Public and Legal Services, occupied a storefront between a hardware store and a bakery. Barbara herself was a compact woman in her late 60s, silver hair cut short, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She looked up when they entered, a recognition flickering across her face. Marcus Hartford. She stood smiling. Didn't expect to see you again. Those graphic novels you brought me 6 years ago, I always wondered if they ever got published. Relief flooded through him. She remembered. They did. Small run with Crescent Moon Comics. But I'm here because I need your notary logs from that transaction. Marcus explained the situation quickly, the plagiarism accusation, the sabotage, the urgent timeline. Barbara didn't hesitate. Give me 5 minutes. She disappeared into a back room, returned with a leather-bound ledger. Flipped to September 2018. Ran her finger down entries until she found what she was looking for. Here we are. Marcus Hartford, also known under pen name Reed Shadows. Multiple contracts notarized between you and Crescent Moon Comics regarding publication rights for the graphic novel series Shattered City. She looked up. I can make certified copies of these entries. Their legal records admissible in court. How long? 10 minutes for copies and certification. Barbara was already moving to her copy machine. $50 for the service. Victoria pulled out her wallet, handed over $100. Keep the change and thank you. You're saving someone's career. Saving 2 careers, Barbara winked at Victoria, and if I'm not mistaken, maybe helping something else along too. The certified copies came out perfect. Notary seal Barbara's signature, the full legal weight of documented proof. Marcus held them, relief so intense it made him dizzy. They had evidence, real, undeniable proof. Now they just had to get back to Manhattan before Derek burned everything down. Victoria was already on her phone checking routes. If we leave now, drive straight through, we'll hit the city by 11:30. Gives us an hour before the board meeting. Then let's move. They climbed back into the Jeep. Marcus started driving, pushing the vehicle as fast as safety allowed on snowy roads. Victoria made calls, mobilizing her allies. Left voicemails for Eleanor Pierce and other board members she trusted. Sent emails with scanned copies of the notary logs attached. Built her case while Marcus drove. 90 minutes and Victoria's phone rang. Eleanor Pierce. I got your emails. The older woman's voice came through the speaker. Derek's been busy. He's convinced half the board that you're compromised, that your judgment is clouded. Claims you spent the night with Hartford and can't be objective about his plagiarism. It's not plagiarism. I'm sending you certified notary logs proving Marcus created this work 6 years ago. Victoria's voice stayed level. Derek is sabotaging this because the Sterling deal blocks his titanium media agenda. I believe you, but Margaret Voss is siding with Derek. She's calling for a vote to suspend you pending investigation into your relationship with Hartford. Eleanor sighed. I can delay them maybe 30 minutes. But Victoria, you need to be here, in person, with that evidence. I'll be there. The call ended. They looked at each other. We're going to make it. Marcus accelerated slightly, pushing 80 on the highway. 2 hours. We'll make it. But at 10:15, Victoria's phone lit up with another call. Robert Sterling. Her hand hovered over the answer button. This was the moment. The investor who could make or break Apex's future, she answered. Mr. Sterling. Ms. Blackwell, I've heard some disturbing allegations about your relationship with one of your employees. Sterling's voice was grave but not angry. I need you to understand that Sterling Partners takes ethics very seriously. I understand, and I'm prepared to address those concerns directly. I'll be at Apex headquarters within the hour with documentation proving Marcus Hartford's innocence. Victoria's voice carried steel. But I also want to be transparent with you about my personal relationship with him. Marcus glanced at her, surprised she was addressing it head on. Go on. During the investigation of the plagiarism allegations, Mr. Hartford and I developed personal feelings for each other. As of this morning, I've filed formal disclosure with our HR department and recused myself from any direct oversight of his work. Another executive will handle his evaluations and approvals. We're following every protocol to ensure no conflict of interest. Silence stretched. Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel. I appreciate your honesty. Sterling's tone shifted slightly. My wife and I were at the party last night. We saw that mistletoe kiss. She said it was real, that she could see genuine feeling between you. I told her she was a hopeless romantic. Another pause. Turns out she was right. Again. A hint of warmth now. Ms. Blackwell's Sterling Partners doesn't invest just in companies. We invest in people, in integrity, in courage. What you just told me took both. He cleared his throat. I'm looking forward to seeing how you handle this board meeting. And Ms. Blackwell, that graphic novel project, Shattered City, from what I've read in the proposal, it's exactly the kind of meaningful content we want to support, assuming Mr. Hartford can prove his ownership. He can, and he will. The call ended. Victoria let out a breath she'd been holding. He's still in. Sterling's still interested. Because you told him the truth. Marcus reached over to squeeze her hand. You could have lied, made excuses, but you didn't. Lying is what Richard would have done. She squeezed back. I'm not him. They drove in focused silence, eating up miles. The city skyline appeared on the horizon at 11:15. Almost there. Marcus's phone rang. Mac. Brother Derek's making his play right now. Emergency board session started early. Margaret Voss is pushing for immediate vote on your termination. Mac spoke fast. You got maybe 40 minutes before they pull the trigger. We're 15 minutes out. Marcus checked the GPS. Tell them to wait. We have proof. I'll do what I can, but move fast. The Jeep cut through midday traffic, Marcus navigating with precision, born of urgency. Victoria was on her phone, calling every board member she could reach, buying time with promises of evidence. They pulled into Apex's parking garage at 11:42, 18 minutes until the board vote. We need to split up. Victoria was already moving. You get the evidence to the boardroom. I'll rally support. We hit them from both sides. Together. Marcus caught her arm. We walk in there together. United front. They need to see we're not hiding. She hesitated, then nodded. Together. They rode the elevator to the executive floor, Marcus carrying the folder of evidence, Victoria beside him, radiating controlled intensity. The boardroom doors were closed. Voices carried through, heated debate, accusations flying. Victoria didn't knock. Just opened the doors and walked in, Marcus right behind her. 12 board members. Derek Walsh at one end of the table looking smug. Margaret Voss at the other looking stern. Eleanor Pierce in the middle relief, washing over her face when she saw them. Every conversation stopped. Victoria's voice cut through the silence like a blade. I believe you're about to vote on a matter that requires additional evidence. Derek Walsh straightened in his chair, composure cracking for just a moment before sliding back into place. Margaret Voss looked between Victoria and Marcus, her expression unreadable, behind steel-rimmed glasses. This meeting was called to address serious allegations. Margaret's voice carried the weight of 30 years in corporate governance. Allegations that should have been handled through proper channels, not ignored while someone attempts a corporate coup. Victoria moved to the head of the table, the position that was rightfully hers. Let's be clear about what's happening here. This isn't about plagiarism. This is about sabotage. Derek's face flushed. That's a serious accusation, backed by serious evidence. Marcus stepped forward, opening the folder. Evidence that proves I created Shattered City 6 years ago under the pen name Reed Shadows. Evidence that shows someone deliberately tried to frame me for stealing my own work. He spread the notary logs across the polished mahogany. Barbara Yates's official seal gleamed under the boardroom lights. 12 pairs of eyes fixed on the documents. Eleanor Pierce leaned forward, examining them closely. These are certified notary records from September 2018. Contracts between Marcus Hartford, operating under the pseudonym Reed Shadows, and Crescent Moon Comics. Convenient timing. Derek's voice dripped skepticism. You disappear for 12 hours with the CEO, then suddenly produce documents that conveniently clear your name. The timing is convenient for you. Victoria's words came out sharp as cut glass. You scheduled this emergency meeting knowing I'd be unreachable. You accelerated the vote to 12:30 specifically because you thought we wouldn't make it back in time. I did no such thing. Then explain why you accessed Marcus's proposal file 17 times in 4 weeks. Victoria pulled out her phone, displayed the server logs. Why you made calls to unknown numbers that trace back to Wall Street Journal reporters. Why you've been shopping Marcus's concept to Titanium Media behind Apex's back. The boardroom went silent. Every member staring at Derek, now skepticism replaced by dawning realization. You have no proof of that. But Derek's voice wavered. Actually, we do. Mac appeared in the doorway carrying a flash drive. Marcus asked me to dig into your activities. Found emails, phone records, meeting notes. You've been trying to steal his concept for months. When that didn't work, you decided to destroy his credibility instead. Marcus took the flash drive, handed it to Eleanor. Derek wanted the Sterling deal to fail. Sterling's family values requirements block his titanium media partnership. If he could kill my project, the flagship of the Sterling proposal, he'd kill the entire deal. Margaret Voss's expression hardened as she reviewed the documents. Mr. Walsh, these are extremely serious allegations. Based on circumstantial evidence and server logs that could mean anything. Oh, Derek stood, trying to reclaim authority. I'm the VP of Operations. Of course I reviewed project files. That's my job. 17 times? Eleanor's eyebrow arched. For a creative proposal outside your department, I was conducting due diligence. You were conducting sabotage. Victoria's voice could have frozen nitrogen. You planted the plagiarism claim. You sent the anonymous emails to the board and Sterling Partners. You arranged the leak to the press, all because Marcus's success meant your failure. Prove it. The proof is in the metadata. Max stepped further into the room. The anonymous email that triggered this witch hunt sent from an IP address that traces back to Apex's internal network, specifically to a terminal in the VP of Operations office. Sent at 2:17 a.m. on December 23rd. Building security logs show you were the only person on that floor at that time. Derek's face went white. We also have a sworn statement from your former assistant. Victoria pulled out another document. Cassandra Mills. She quit 2 weeks ago after you ordered her to fabricate evidence against Marcus. She documented everything. Kept copies of your emails. Recorded conversations where you explicitly discussed destroying his reputation. The folder landed on the table with a sound like a gunshot. Margaret Voss picked it up, scanned the contents, her lips compressed into a thin line. Mr. Walsh, I'm formally suspending you pending a full investigation. Her tone allowed no argument. Security will escort you from the building. You're to have no contact with Apex employees or property until this matter is resolved. You can't do this. Derek's composure shattered completely. I've given this company 12 years. I built the operational infrastructure that allowed it to scale. You're going to throw that away because some creative wannabe claims I sabotaged him. We're protecting this company from someone who put personal ambition above fiduciary responsibility. Margaret stood, signaling 2 security guards waiting outside. Escort Mr. Walsh out. Derek gathered his belongings with shaking hands, but as he reached the door, he turned back. His eyes found Victoria and Marcus standing side by side. They spent the night together. The words came out venomous. Your CEO and the man she's defending. They drove into a blizzard, got stranded at some inn, and came back this morning wearing the same clothes. She's compromised. This entire defense is because they're sleeping together. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Every board member turned to stare at Victoria and Marcus. The implications settled heavy and uncomfortable. Derek smiled bitter and triumphant. Ask them. Ask if they shared a room last night. Ask if their judgment is clouded by personal involvement. Because if it is, everything she's saying becomes suspect. Security began moving Derek toward the exit, but the damage was done. Doubt flickered across several board members' faces. Margaret Voss looked at Victoria with an expression somewhere between disappointment and calculation. Is this true? This was the moment, the choice that would define everything going forward. Victoria could lie, deflect, say they had separate rooms, that Derek was making desperate accusations. Half the board would probably believe her, or she could tell the truth and face the consequences. Marcus watched her, saw the decision forming behind her eyes, felt his own career hanging in the balance. Yes, Victoria's voice rang clear and steady. Marcus and I spent last night together. Gasps rippled through the room. Derek's smile widened even as security pulled him toward the door. We drove upstate to retrieve evidence proving his innocence. Victoria continued, meeting each board member's gaze. Our vehicle crashed in the blizzard. We took shelter at Pine Ridge Inn. There was one room available. We shared it. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Derek's voice carried from the hallway. She's protecting him because of personal feelings. Her judgment is compromised. You can't trust anything she says. Get him out of here. Margaret nodded to security and Derek was finally removed from the room. But his words lingered. Margaret turned back to Victoria, her expression grave. You understand what this means. The optics alone. I filed formal relationship disclosure with HR this morning. Victoria pulled out her phone, showed the time-stamped email. As of 6 a.m. today, I've recused myself from any direct oversight of Marcus Hartford. His work will be supervised by another executive. I will have no input on his project's evaluations or compensation. Eleanor Pierce leaned back, studying Victoria with something like approval. You disclosed voluntarily. Company policy requires disclosure of romantic relationships between supervisors and subordinates. I'm following that policy. Victoria's voice stayed level. The relationship developed during the investigation, which concluded this morning when we obtained definitive proof of Marcus's ownership. The timing is questionable. Margaret pulled off her glasses, rubbed the bridge of her nose. It creates the appearance of impropriety even if no actual impropriety occurred. The timing is what it is. Victoria straightened her shoulders, but it doesn't change the facts. Marcus Hartford created Shattered City 6 years ago. The notary logs prove it. The certified contracts prove it. Derek Walsh orchestrated this entire scandal to advance his own agenda. Those facts exist independent of my personal relationship with Marcus. Nevertheless, Margaret's tone suggested this discussion was far from over. The board needs to address this matter separately. Your relationship with an employee, regardless of disclosure protocols. Excuse me, a new voice interrupted from the doorway. Robert Sterling stood there, his distinguished silver hair slightly disheveled from the winter wind. His wife Helen stood beside him, elegant in a navy coat. Mr. Sterling, Margaret rose immediately. We weren't expecting you until the formal presentation. Change of plans. Sterling moved into the room, his presence commanding immediate attention. I wanted to address this situation personally before any irreversible decisions were made. He looked at Marcus, then Victoria, then the notary log spread across the table. I've been in business for 40 years, built Sterling Partners from a small family fund into one of the most respected investment firms in the country. Sterling's voice carried the authority of experience. In that time, I've learned to recognize integrity when I see it. He picked up one of the notary logs, examined it. This morning, Ms. Blackwell called me. She was honest about her relationship with Mr. Hartford. She could have lied, could have hidden it until after we finalized the deal, but she chose transparency. She chose to follow proper disclosure protocols, even knowing it might cost her this partnership. Sterling set the document down carefully. That's integrity. That's the kind of character Sterling Partners looks for in our investments. Helen Sterling moved to stand beside her husband. We saw them at the party last night. The kiss under the mistletoe. I told Robert it was real, that I could see genuine connection between them. He thought I was being romantic. A hint of warmth entered Sterling's stern expression. Turns out she was right, as usual. He addressed the full board now. What I witnessed this morning was two people who drove through a blizzard to prove the truth, who followed proper channels for relationship disclosure, who prioritized company integrity over personal convenience. Mr. Hartford's work speaks for itself. Shattered City is exactly the meaningful content Sterling Partners wants to support, and Ms. Blackwell's leadership is exactly what we need in a partner. Margaret Voss cleared her throat. Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, the appearance is that you have a CEO who's honest even when honesty is difficult. Sterling's tone sharpened, and an employee who fought to clear his name instead of running from false accusations. Those aren't weaknesses, Ms. Voss. Those are strengths. He pulled an envelope from his coat pocket. This is a formal letter of intent from Sterling Partners. $200 million in investment capital contingent on Apex moving forward, with Marcus Hartford's Shattered City as the flagship project. We're also expanding our partnership to include a 3-year development deal for additional content aligned with our values. The envelope landed on the table with finality. But I want to be clear. Sterling looked directly at Victoria. We're investing because of your integrity, not despite your relationship. The fact that you can maintain professional boundaries while acknowledging personal feelings shows exactly the kind of judgment we trust. Silence filled the boardroom. Margaret Voss looked at the letter of intent, then at Victoria, then back at Sterling. I see. Her tone shifted, recalculating. Mr. Sterling, we appreciate your confidence in Apex and in Ms. Blackwell's leadership. Then I suggest you stop wasting time questioning her judgment and start focusing on the real issue. Sterling's words carried steel beneath the politeness. You have an employee who was falsely accused and a VP who committed fraud and sabotage. The first deserves an apology. The second deserves prosecution. Eleanor Pierce spoke up, her voice warm. I move that we formally clear Marcus Hartford of all plagiarism allegations based on the evidence presented. The notary logs are conclusive. Seconded. Another board member, Thomas Reeves, raised his hand. All in favor. Margaret called the vote resignation in her tone. Every hand went up, unanimous. Motion carries. Mr. Hartford, on behalf of the board, I apologize for the distress this false accusation caused. Margaret's apology sounded stiff but genuine. Your project is approved to move forward. Relief flooded through Marcus, so intense it made him dizzy. Cleared, vindicated, his reputation intact. Thank you. His voice came out rougher than intended. I appreciate the board's faith in me and in this project. As for the matter of Derek Walsh, Margaret's expression went cold. I recommend we turn over all evidence of fraud and sabotage to both our legal team and local authorities. His actions warrant criminal investigation. Agreement rippled through the board. And regarding Ms. Blackwell's relationship disclosure, Eleanor spoke carefully. I move that we accept her recusal from direct oversight as sufficient compliance with company policy. The relationship was disclosed promptly and appropriate safeguards were implemented. Seconded. Thomas again. Another vote. Another unanimous approval. Margaret looked at Victoria, something like respect finally showing through her skepticism. The board supports your continued leadership, Ms. Blackwell, but we'll expect regular updates on the implementation of oversight protocols regarding Mr. Hartford's work. Of course. Victoria nodded, professional, despite the personal victory. Sterling cleared his throat. If we're done with the dramatics, I'd like to discuss the formal partnership timeline. My team is ready to move forward immediately. The meeting shifted to business. Contract terms, development, schedules, investment tranches. Marcus found himself included in the discussion. His input valued, his vision respected. 2 hours later, when the board finally adjourned, Marcus and Victoria walked out together. Not hiding, not pretending. Just two professionals who happened to be navigating something personal alongside the professional. Mac was waiting in the corridor, a huge grin splitting his face. Brother, you did it. Derek's being escorted out by actual police now. They're talking fraud charges, corporate espionage, the whole 9 yards. Good. Marcus felt no satisfaction in Derek's downfall, just relief that the threat was neutralized. Also, there's a reporter from Forbes in the lobby asking about the Sterling deal. Word travels fast. Mac's grin widened. They want a statement about the holiday romance that saved a $200 million partnership. Should I tell them to pound sand? Victoria and Marcus exchanged glances. No, Victoria decided. We give them a brief statement. Control the narrative before they create their own. 20 minutes later, they stood in Apex's lobby with Forbes, Wall Street Journal, and Bloomberg reporters all gathered. Victoria spoke first, her CEO voice crisp and authoritative. Yesterday, an Apex employee was falsely accused of plagiarism. An internal investigation revealed the accusations were fabricated as part of a sabotage attempt by a senior executive who has since been terminated and is facing criminal charges. She gestured to Marcus. Marcus Hartford created the graphic novel series Shattered City 6 years ago. We have certified notary records, original artwork, and contractual documentation proving his ownership. His project will serve as the flagship for Apex's new partnership with Sterling Partners. A reporter raised her hand. Mrs. Blackwell, there are reports that you and Mr. Hartford are romantically involved. Did that relationship influence your defense of him? Mr. Hartford and I developed personal feelings during the investigation. Those feelings didn't influence the facts of the case. The evidence speaks for itself. But we've followed all company protocols, including formal relationship disclosure and implementing appropriate oversight structures. Victoria's tone allowed no room for insinuation. Apex Media has clear policies regarding workplace relationships. We're following them. Mr. Hartford, how does it feel to be vindicated? Marcus stepped forward, choosing his words carefully. Grateful, relieved, but mostly proud that the truth came out before irreparable damage was done. This project means a lot to me personally. It was created during the darkest time of my life after losing my wife. Seeing it get a second chance feels like redemption. In the relationship with your boss, some might say that's a conflict of interest. Some might say a lot of things. Marcus met the reporter's eyes steadily. But Victoria Blackwell is the most ethical person I've ever worked with. She risked her reputation to pursue the truth even when it would have been easier to fire me and move on. That's integrity. That's leadership. And yes, I'm grateful to work for her and honored to build something with her. The way he said it, professional on the surface but carrying unmistakable layers beneath, made his meaning clear. The reporters got their soundbite. The story would run. But Marcus and Victoria had controlled the narrative. They wrapped the impromptu press conference and retreated to Victoria's office, alone for the first time since the boardroom confrontation. Victoria kicked off her shoes, sank into her desk chair. That was exhausting. That was a victory. Marcus moved to stand by the window, looking out at the city. We won. Derek's gone. The project's approved. Sterling's in. We actually won. We did. She stood, moved to join him at the window, close enough that their shoulders touched. And now comes the hard part, which is figuring out how to actually make this work. Victoria gestured between them. The relationship, the professional boundaries, the gossip and scrutiny, and inevitable complications. We make rules. Marcus turned to face her. Clear boundaries. At work, you're CEO, and I'm creative director under Mac's supervision. We're professional, appropriate by the book. No personal conversations during business hours. No favoritism or appearance of it. And outside work. Outside work, we're Victoria and Marcus. Two people trying to figure out if what we started last night can become something real. He touched her hand gently. We go slow. We date properly. We learn each other's rhythms and boundaries. We build something solid. What if I'm terrible at this? The vulnerability in her voice caught him off guard. At dating relationships, letting someone in. What if I push you away without meaning to? Then you tell me you're pushing me away and we talk about why. Marcus cupped her face, thumb stroking her cheek. We're both going to mess up sometimes, Victoria. I'll probably get insecure about being the CEO's boyfriend instead of being valued for my work. You'll probably bury yourself in the office and forget to text back. We'll have fights about work-life balance and boundaries and stupid things that don't matter. He smiled. But we'll also have moments where everything clicks, where we understand each other without words, where coming home to each other feels like the best part of the day. And those moments will make the messy parts worth it. You're very optimistic for a man who just survived corporate sabotage in a blizzard. I'm optimistic because I'm looking at you. And I'm thinking about how you drove into a storm to help prove my innocence. How you disclosed our relationship even knowing it might cost you everything. How you stood in that boardroom and chose honesty over convenience. Marcus leaned his forehead against hers. That's the woman I'm falling for. The one who does the hard right thing instead of the easy wrong thing. Falling for. Victoria repeated the word softly. Not fallen, still in process. Still in process, he confirmed, but getting there fast. They kissed slow and sweet, sealing promises they were still learning to make. A knock interrupted. Eleanor Pierce stood in the doorway, her expression warm. Sorry to intrude, but Victoria, I wanted to say I'm proud of you. The older woman moved into the office. 15 years ago, you walked into Apex scared and hungry and determined. You've built something remarkable. And today you showed why, because you never compromise your integrity, even when it costs you. Thank you, Eleanor. That means a lot coming from you. I also wanted to tell you both that I'm making a formal recommendation to the board. Eleanor looked at Marcus. We're creating a new position, Vice President of Creative Development. Marcus, I'd like you to consider taking it. Report directly to me instead of operations separate from Victoria's oversight entirely. Removes any appearance of conflict. Marcus blinked, stunned. That's VP level is is exactly where your talent deserves to be. Eleanor smiled. The Shattered City project is just the beginning. Sterling wants a pipeline of meaningful content. You understand that vision better than anyone else in this company. Say yes. He looked at Victoria, seeking her reaction, found only encouragement. Then yes, absolutely yes. Excellent. We'll formalize it after the holidays. For now, go celebrate, both of you. You've earned it. Eleanor left, and Victoria laughed, genuine delight that transformed her face. VP, Marcus, that's incredible. It's surreal. He was still processing. This morning I thought my career was over. Now I'm being promoted to executive level. Because you're talented. Because your work matters. Because Sterling Partners sees what I've seen for months. Victoria took his hands. You earned this, not through any relationship with me, but through the quality of what you create. Marcus pulled her close, overwhelmed by how completely his life had transformed in 24 hours. His phone buzzed. Declan calling. Hey, kid. Dad, I saw the news. Forbes is reporting you got cleared and some VP got arrested for fraud. Declan sounded equal parts relieved and confused. What the hell happened? Marcus gave him the condensed version, the plagiarism accusation, the investigation, the evidence that saved him. Left out certain details about blizzards and shared hotel rooms. So you're okay? Your job is safe. Better than safe, they're promoting me to VP of Creative Development. Declan whooped loud enough to make Marcus pull the phone from his ear. That's amazing, Dad. I'm so proud of you. Mom would be too. The mention of Sarah sent a pang through Marcus's chest, but it was gentler now. Bittersweet instead of agonizing. Yeah, I think she would. He glanced at Victoria, who was politely pretending not to listen. Listen, there's something else. Something personal. You're dating someone. Declan didn't phrase it as a question. How did you, Dad, you've been alone for 6 years. I've been hoping you'd find someone. Who is she? Victoria Blackwell. My boss, well, former direct boss. We're implementing oversight structures to avoid conflicts. Marcus felt ridiculous explaining this to his son. It's new, it's complicated, but it's real. Silence on the other end. Then is she good to you? Does she make you happy? Yeah, she does. Then I'm happy for you. Seriously, Dad, you deserve this. You deserve to be happy. Declan paused. Can I meet her? Maybe when I'm home for winter break? Marcus looked at Victoria, who'd clearly heard enough to understand the question. She nodded. Yeah, she'd like that. They said goodbye, and Marcus ended the call feeling lighter. Declan's blessing meant more than he'd realized. Your son sounds wonderful. Victoria moved back to his side. He's better than I deserve. Smarter, kinder, more emotionally mature at 19 than I was at 30. Marcus wrapped an arm around her waist. He wants to meet you over winter break. I'd like that, though I'm terrified of disappointing him. You won't. He's a good judge of character. Marcus kissed her temple. Besides, if he doesn't like you, I'll just have to choose between you and him. And honestly, he's got college tuition to finish, so you're looking pretty good right now. Victoria laughed, swatted his arm. That's terrible, Daddy. That's honesty. He grinned. One of my core values. They stayed like that as afternoon turned to evening, making plans for how to navigate the next days and weeks. Decided Marcus would move into a different department officially after New Year's. Agreed to weekly check-ins about how they were balancing personal and professional. Established clear rules about no discussing work outside the office, no using their relationship for professional advantage in either direction. It felt good, felt solid, felt like building something that could last. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Mac Media's calling it the Christmas Miracle Romance. Thought you should know you're trending on Twitter. He showed Victoria, who groaned. This is going to be insufferable. Could be worse. They could be calling it the Mistletoe scandal. Don't give them ideas. But when Marcus checked social media, the response was surprisingly positive. People loved the narrative wrongly accused employee CEO who stood by him relationship that developed during the crisis. It hit all the notes of a good story. Some cynics questioned the ethics. Some armchair lawyers debated conflict of interest. But mostly people seemed charmed by the idea of finding love while fighting for truth. One tweet in particular caught Marcus's attention. CEO risks everything to prove employees' innocence, then discloses relationship following all proper protocols. This is how you do workplace romance with integrity. At Apex Media setting standards. Look at this, he showed Victoria. She read it, something softening in her expression. People get it. They understand we did this the right way. Because we did. Marcus set the phone aside. Now, can we please go somewhere and not think about work or media or any of this for a few hours? My place or yours? Yours has better wine. Mine has better pizza delivery. He considered. We could combine resources. They ended up at Victoria's penthouse apartment, sleek and minimalist, exactly what Marcus expected from her public persona. But she showed him the spare room she'd converted into a small art studio, half-finished paintings leaning against walls. I didn't know you painted. I don't, not really. I try sometimes when I can't sleep. She looked embarrassed. They're terrible. Marcus examined a canvas, abstract swirls of color that somehow captured loneliness and yearning. They're honest. That's better than technically perfect. You're biased. Absolutely, but I'm also right. They ordered pizza, drank wine, talked about everything except work. Victoria told him about growing up in foster care, the families she'd lived with, the ones who'd been kind and the ones who hadn't. Marcus shared memories of Sarah's stories about Declan growing up, the small moments that defined a life. It felt easy, natural, like they'd been doing this for years instead of hours. Later, when they ended up in Victoria's bed again, it was different from the desperate intensity at the inn. This was slower, exploratory, learning each other's responses and preferences, building intimacy that went beyond physical. Afterward, Victoria traced patterns on Marcus's chest, her expression thoughtful. What are you thinking? He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. That this is the first time in 5 years I've felt like myself. Not the CEO, not the success story, not the foster kid who made good. Just me, Victoria, the person underneath all the armor. I like that person. Marcus pressed a kiss to her forehead. I like her a lot. Good. Because she's terrible at this relationship stuff and might need patience. I've got patience and terrible relationship skills of my own to contribute. We'll figure it out together. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, the city lights twinkling through the windows. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the Apex boardroom, presenting the first issue of Shattered City to the Sterling Partners executive team. The artwork had been refined, the story strengthened, the production values elevated with Sterling's investment. Robert Sterling held the advanced copy, studying each page with careful attention. His team did the same, and the silence stretched long enough to make Marcus nervous. Then Sterling smiled. This is exactly what we hoped for. Meaningful content with commercial appeal. The story resonates, rebuilding after loss, finding strength in community, the possibility of second chances. Relief washed over Marcus, though he kept his professional composure. We'd like to discuss expanding the initial order. Sterling set the comic down. Double the print run, push for wider distribution, potentially explore film adaptation rights. Marcus glanced at Victoria, who sat at the far end of the table in her CEO capacity. She gave him a subtle nod, permission to negotiate, though she'd recused herself from the final decision. I'd be open to discussing those options. Marcus kept his voice steady. Though I'd want creative control maintained through any adaptation. Understandable. We'll have our legal team draft terms. The meeting continued, details and timelines and budget allocations. When it finally concluded, Sterling pulled Marcus aside. You've done excellent work here. The board tells me you are settling in well as VP of Creative Development. It's been an incredible opportunity. Eleanor Pierce has been a great mentor. Good, that's what we like to hear. Sterling paused, then smiled. My wife wanted me to ask, how are things with you and Victoria? She's been following your story. Marcus couldn't help but smile. Complicated, but good. We're still figuring out how to balance everything, but we're making it work. I'm glad. Helen was right about you two. Said she saw something real under that mistletoe. Sterling clapped Marcus on the shoulder. Keep up the good work, both professionally and personally. Later, Marcus met Victoria in her office. They'd maintained strict professional boundaries at work. No personal conversations, no physical contact, separate meetings when possible. It was harder than Marcus expected, but necessary. Dinner tonight. He kept his tone casual, aware that anyone could walk by. My place 7, she looked up from her laptop. And Marcus, congratulations on the Sterling expansion. You earned it. The pride in her voice, even filtered through professional distance, warmed him. That evening, in the privacy of her apartment, they celebrated properly. Victoria had cooked an attempt at pasta that was slightly overcooked but endearing in its imperfection. I'm terrible at this. She looked at the mediocre carbonara with dismay. You're trying. That's what matters. Marcus took a bite. Besides, I've eaten MREs in combat zones. This is gourmet. You're a terrible liar. I'm a supportive boyfriend. There's a difference. The word boyfriend still felt new but right. They'd been navigating this relationship for 3 months now, learning each other's rhythms and boundaries. Victoria still worked too much. Marcus still got insecure sometimes about being seen as the CEO's boyfriend instead of valued for his own merit. They'd had fights about work-life balance and communication and the inevitable complications of mixing personal and professional. But they always came back to each other, always chose to work through the hard parts instead of walking away. Declan had visited over winter break, met Victoria and given his approval, though not before grilling her about her intentions and making it clear he'd defend his father fiercely if she hurt him. Victoria had handled it with grace, even admitting she found his protectiveness touching. The board had accepted their relationship after seeing them maintain professional boundaries impeccably. Sterling Partners had become one of Apex's strongest advocates, the partnership thriving beyond initial projections. Derek Walsh was facing criminal charges for fraud and corporate espionage, his career destroyed by his own choices. Everything had worked out better than Marcus could have hoped. Penny, for your thoughts, Victoria interrupted his reflection. Just thinking about how much has changed since Christmas Eve. Marcus pulled her close. How I almost lost everything and somehow ended up with more than I knew I wanted. Same. She rested her head on his shoulder. I spent 5 years convinced I was better off alone. Turns out I was just scared. Scared of trusting someone and getting hurt again. Are you still scared? Terrified. She looked up at him. But doing it anyway, because you're worth the risk. Right back at you. Marcus kissed her softly. You know what Sarah used to say, that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act despite the fear. Choosing hope when you have every reason to be cynical. That's real strength. She was wise. She was, and I think she'd like you, would approve of me taking this chance. Marcus felt the truth of it settle warm in his chair. Not because you're replacing her, nobody could, but because you're helping me become someone new. Someone who can honor the past while building a future. Victoria's eyes shone with unshed tears. That's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever said to me. Get used to it. I'm full of beautiful things. He grinned. Also terrible jokes, mediocre cooking skills, and an encyclopedic knowledge of graphic novel history that will bore you to tears. I'm sure I'll survive. They spent the evening talking about the future, cautiously optimistic about where this relationship might go. Neither of them ready for huge commitments, but both willing to keep choosing each other day by day. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Mac. Just saw the Forbes article. How Marcus Hartford and Victoria Blackwell proved workplace romance can work. You two are becoming the corporate world's favorite couple. Enjoy the celebrity status, brother. He showed Victoria, who laughed. This is absurd. This is our life now. Might as well embrace it. I suppose we should be grateful people care more about us succeeding than about the scandal potential. People love a good story. Wrongly accused employee CEO who risks everything for truth romance that develops through adversity, happy ending. Marcus pulled her onto his lap. We hit all the narrative beats. Except this isn't an ending. It's barely a beginning. Then we better make sure the next chapters are worth reading. They kissed as snow began falling outside the windows. 1 year since the blizzard that changed everything. 1 year of rebuilding, healing, risking hope after loss. Marcus thought about the graphic novel he'd created 6 years ago in the depths of grief, about the character Adrian who'd lost everything and found the strength to build something new, about the message that failure isn't the end of the story, just the beginning of a different one. He'd written that story to save himself. Never imagined it would lead him here, to success, to vindication, to love he didn't think he'd ever feel again. Sometimes the worst things that happen become the foundation for something better. Not because the tragedy was good, but because survival and rebuilding and choosing to hope again creates strength that wouldn't exist otherwise. Marcus held Victoria close, grateful for second chances, and blizzards and mistletoe, kisses that started as strategy and became truth. The future stretched ahead, uncertain and complicated and full of possibility. And for the first time in 6 years, Marcus was ready to face it.